Hello, my name is Magnus Samuelsson. I'm concept responsible at Väderstad, and today I will present to you the Väderstad tines and point concept. And this is very much about how to sell a cultivator, because it tells about how the soil is being moved and what we do with it. If we look a little bit historically, the cultivators were invented in the end of 1800s, some very simple machines. The one we use today was really developed back in the United States in the 30s, where we had some what's called the Dust Bowl. That was a real big disaster ecologically. There was a lot of soil being moved away from the prairies, and this got a guy called Fred Home to start to think about how can we prevent this. And he used some inspiration from road building machines, and he constructed a machine that is a little bit the father of today's cultivators. Väderstad has been active quite a while in the cultivator business. So back in the 1970s already started. So we have a long experience. We have tried a lot of different methods and so on, which is a good base, a good foundation to work with tomorrow as well. If we want to do a good cultivator result, it's extremely important not to see the cultivator as one part, but we need to see it as part of a chain. And this chain, it starts already with a combine. The combine needs to produce a result that is beneficial for the cultivator. And what is that? We need to keep the stubble short. That should be less than 20 centimeters. Long stubble is a problem because that will swim on the surface. It's a little bit like an avalanche backpack that you use to protect yourself against avalanches. There you become bigger and therefore you float on top of the avalanche. The same thing exactly happens with long pieces of straw. When you're in the incorporation process, they will swim on top all the time and will not tend to go down as well. So keeping the stubble short means that you will have a better incorporation. Another thing as well is how you chop that straw. So it's very important to have a good working straw chopper. And that straw chopper should make maximum 5 centimeter pieces of the straw. And why is that? Because straw that's been chopped fine, it will fall through the stubble and get closer to the ground. And the closer to the ground we're getting, the better the result will be. So everything needs to be close to the ground to be incorporated better. So those are two key things from the combine. Of course, it's very important as well to distribute it perfectly through the working width as well. Otherwise, we'll have different conditions throughout also. If we look as well, what can we do more for the cultivator? It's also very important to do the stubble cultivation. And the stubble cultivation, it helps us by getting the stubble already mixed into the topsoil. And we should not cultivate right after, we should wait a little while. Usually wait until the seed, the volunteer, has germinated. And then you go over it with the cultivator and incorporate it. And what's happened then with the residues? It's starting to rot. It's become heavier by taking up moisture. And this, in combination with being a bit close to the ground or in the ground, makes it easier to incorporate as well. So the stubble cultivation will help us to obtain a better cultivation result as well. If we look, how should we do the stubble cultivation? I always say, look at tools that are mixing, because we need to mix as much as possible to get this dirt on every piece of straw there is. So therefore the conical disc is the superior way to do it. Anytime we will go for a tool that will turn the soil around, we do have a problem. We do not get as good a mixture. So a spherical shape of disc will have a little bit the same type of work as the plow, just like a disc plow does. if you look at the conical shape of the disc, it will work as a cultivator. It will mix thoroughly instead. So there are two different ways of working there. And to get an optimal stubble cultivation, use a conical disc. When should we use a disc and a tine? It is very important to think about what they do. And the disc will always leave the same cultivation bottom, no matter how deep we go. It is very resource effective. You can go fast with it. You have very little wear on the disc. So for stubble cultivation, this is optimal. Usually the disc can be recommended down to roughly 15 centimeters working depth. After that, it's often better to be able to tailor your cultivation bottom. You want to really see how can I optimize that for the coming crop and not just have one single option. So, and that's where the cultivator comes in and gives us a possibility to improve the result. So with the cultivator, we can really target exactly the crop and to make sure the plants has the best possible well-being. We will now go into speak about the tines a little bit. Because cultivator has a frame, it has a tines that holds the element of work. And there is quite a few differences between the tines. And as you know, we offer quite a few of them at Väderstad as well. If we put them all in a row, like you can see on that slide here, you can split them basically roughly between two types of tines. One is the spring tine, as you can see on the one side here, and the other part are the more rigid tines. The difference here are usually on working depth, because the spring tine, it has to vibrate heavily. And if we want to make a spring tine to go very deep, that has to be extremely long and also have a duty to manage to keep those vibration. Therefore, it's not as good for the really big working depths as we're talking about there. But the spring tine still has some really good advantages. It needs less draw force requirement. We have made trials here against the normal cultus tine, and we saw that the spring tine had up to 35% less draw force requirement, which is a lot. We have a better crumbling. Since that tine is vibrating all the time, it breaks the crumbles loose as well, hits the crumbles loose also, so from the clods. So that's a nice thing as well. We also use less wear parts. So that's the third big benefit. So the spring tine, if I can use it, it is a really nice thing. If we look at the distance between the tines in the soil, the longer our distance is, the less draw force requirement we will have. But we will also have a rougher soil surface. So whenever we want to make really fine tilth, we want to move the tines more together. So, but that costs us in draw force requirement, of course. And if we look at the cultivation bottom, so you can see there is also big differences. We have to optimize for our soils. What do we want to achieve simply? There are also two angles that we can use on a soil cultivation equipment. One is a little bit more straight like this, and the other one is a little bit more flat. And if you go straight like this, you have some benefits. You're moving more soil in the driving direction. So, but also you're breaking it up a little bit more. So on a cultivator, that will take more draw force requirement. Many times we also work in tough soil conditions. Then we want to have a soil searching ability. That means that you want to have a pull downwards with the cultivator. And that is always better obtained if you have a flat angle of entry. The flat angle of entry will also produce smaller clods, which is a big benefit as well. So it's there. You just have to know what the benefits are of each, so you're aware of that, how the cultivator will work for you. So, and if we go to the points, the points are very important. Traditionally, there has been a lot of points available, but very little guidance to the customer. What should you choose? It's been a really tough way to go there. Little advice why to choose which one. The first thing what we as manufacturers should think about is though to ask the customers what is he aiming for. That's the key to everything. We have constructed our points a little bit modular. So this means we have one part that's a point down in the bottom. It's followed by the shin up a little bit further, taking care of the soil afterwards. We have shears on the side for the cutting of roots and so on. We can go deeper with a subsoiling point as well. So this gives us a really big versatility. We can take all the different points and shins and combine them with each other. And that gives us a big toolbox. So therefore the modularity is something really nice. It enables us to combine different things with each other. The point choice, it has a lot of things are deciding which points we should choose. Weather is one big thing. Your crop rotation, what did you have there before? It will have big impact. Your soil conditions, your residue conditions, everything. That will all be decision factors where you should decide which point to choose. And the choice you make afterwards, it has a lot of impact also on the which type of clods, how much soil we will use or move, how much diesel we will consume. That's a big difference between different points. It will have an impact on the cultivation bottom as well. So both factors, what point should I choose and what the point you choose, what that will affect, those are quite big factors. There are different points doing different things. And we have tried here to split them up a little bit according to their job in the soil. So as you can see on the skids, there are cutting ones, there are breaking ones, mixing, cutting and breaking, and breaking and mixing. So I've been trying to take those apart a little bit by and by to explain what each of them does for you. And if we start them with the cutting points, so those are very important for example, organic farmers that wants to kill weeds. And here we have one of them as the typical one, the goosefoot. So the goosefoot will do a really good job going shallow, roughly 5 centimeters deep, cutting off all the live material. It's important that we have a full cut out here so that no root survives the goosefoot passing. We should also be careful so we don't go too deep with the goosefoot, because then you risk that the whole tine will move backwards and you have a false angle and the goosefoot will not do as good job as it would otherwise. We have constructed our goosefoots with a design that you can use it quite a lot and the wear is still reduced. So that's important for the life length of the goosefoot. We offer them for the Swift and the NZA, NZM. So we have them for the vibrating tines where we have no reconsolidation on there. There are also points where you cut here, but you can also do mixing, and those are the wing shears. Wing shears go through the ground, the traditional ones, with a little bit of angle, a little bit of inclination, and they have a point in the middle. The point helps that we get soil searching ability, so also in heavy condition we keep the set working depth. We do not roll on top of the ground. The wing shear does not only cut, it also lifts the soil. So that's important to keep that in mind. That's a big difference to the goosefoot. We should not use a wing shear as a instead of having a tighter tine distance. We have to be aware only part of the soil will be actually mixed. The rest, it looks good, but it does not mix. It only lifts it as well there. So it's not for going deep, this tool. If you go deep with a wing shear and you have a little bit heavier soil, you risk to make a pan, a cultivation pan. And that is a problem. We have to go even deeper next time, and that costs too much diesel. So wing shears do the best work in the topsoil. The difference between the goosefoot and the wing shear, like I said before, it is the work it does. It lifts the soil as well. It has part of the horizon that's been mixed. So they are quite different. We also, though, have a type of wing shear that is flatter. Instead of 23 degrees of inclination, we have only 8, and that borrows some of the work-wise from the goosefoot and puts it on wing shear, especially if you combine it with a point like the brake mix that does not bring up any soil to the surface. But we should be aware a brake mix point will not have such a soil searching ability as a normal point does. So, but this is an interesting alternative. It only cuts, so this means also that we leave a different work horizon behind us. We have, since we have less inclination, less wear on the point as well. It will go a little bit easier through the ground, so less draw force requirement. So a very interesting wing shear solution as well. We do almost bring no soil to the surface, very, very little, in combination with a brake mix point. If we look at it, you can see the difference here between the normal wing shear and the flatter one. So very important to keep those in mind and the difference in the work what they do. We also have the mixing points. The mixing points are what we think of as a traditional cultivator point. The shape of the mixing point, it decides quite a lot. If we have a square shape down at the bottom, we will bring more soil with us to the top, but it will penetrate a little bit less. So there are all benefits and disadvantages. We have chosen to have a pointed cultivator point because it simply enters better into tough conditions. When we look at how a cultivator point and shin, how it works, we have to look at the mixing and how does that happen. If we go to the where the soil starts, so to say, and it comes up, some of the soil will go all the way up the tine, and that will be the best mixing we can achieve. And that's what we call the primary mixing. And on the other hand, on the way up, you will lose some soil on the sides as well. And that's the secondary mixing. It's not as good mixed as the primary. We also have the tertiary mixing, which means it's a third type. And that's one coming on the side of the tine. So 3 types of them, and that's quite important to keep in mind. To get the perfect mixing result, we want to get as much as possible up there and into the mixing. So so that's good to keep in mind in the back of your head why we construct the points and shin as we do. If we look at very shallow work, you should use a wide point. So usually the more shallow, the wider. So it has a big benefit of bringing with it a lot of residues and everything, also and full coverage, also at very shallow working depth. Nice when you're working in manure, for example. So it also kills weeds really nice. So it's not for going deep, these points. Stick with them on top. We have quite a nice range there now. With 80 to 120 point, we have the 120 point, and we have the 210 millimeter point. So it's a wide variety for going shallow. You can use them also for the stubble preparation. You then go a little bit angle to the combine, and you will distribute the residues really well also. So that's an alternative to going with a disc tool, just like that. You can also use them for going a bit deeper. If you, for example, have problems with rodents, mice, for example, then you want to go deep to really destroy all the nests and kill off as many mice as you possibly can. And then a wider point makes sense. But be aware, it takes quite a lot of draw force requirement for you. If we look on different soil types, the lighter soils usually requires a wider point. Because a lighter soil, what we want to do is to give the roots as much surface as possible where they can enter and take up the nutrients. Many of the lighter soils are self-compacting, so it's important that we get the whole horizon cut out and mixed. So, and there the wider points do a really good job because they will leave quite a flat bottom afterwards. So depending on a little bit the working depth, you can use those wider points on the lighter soil as well. There are big differences in the different type of points you choose. For example, if you look here, you have the 80 and you have the 120 millimeter point. It's a little bit comparison. And you can see down on the bottom here how the root available surface differences. So it does make a difference which point width you are using and which work result you will get from that. We also have the more conventional points, that's like the 50 and 80 millimeter, for example. Here it's also more for all types of soils. You can go fairly deep with 50, for example. The difference here is a lot about soil volume, just like the other point. A 80 millimeter compared to a 50 millimeter offers you 23% more soil volume. And more soil volume means you can swallow more residues and incorporate them properly. So that's good to keep in mind. If I have more volume, I can swallow more residues. We also have the angled points, like the 50 to 80 and 80 to 120. The angled points are going in a little bit deeper into soil. The penetration is better than on a wider point, for example. They will also take less draw force requirement because what takes the biggest draw force requirement is in the bottom where you cultivate. The disadvantage can be on a normal point that when it wears, it becomes wider. So it will change its working behavior slightly. So that's good to keep in mind when you use the pointed shape points. The benefit as well, you bring more of the soil upwards than a straight point. It will not take all the soil upwards. A shaped point like this, it will bring everything with it. So you will have a better mixing through that. You will also have a little bit less clod creation. When you go deep, it depends on what is the shape down in the very bottom that you work. That determines how much clods will you create down there. Because it's down at the bottom, that's where the clods are created. It's not on the top. So if you can have a smaller piece of the point down in the bottom, you will have less clod created. If we look at the heavier soils, the point choice, it's also quite important there with the clod creation. Just throughout, the wider we have down there, the bigger the clods. You can go down to a really breaking point, you will have no clods whatsoever. In the heavier soils, we usually have a good structure in the soil, so we may not need to cut everything out at all. So that's a good thing. We can save that draw force requirement, the power needed, just to be sure that we have enough to bury the residues and to incorporate them well. The different points that we recommend for the heavier soils, those are the 50, 80 point. So a little bit more narrow ones where you can also, if needed, go a bit deeper. It depends on the soil type, what type of cone that you will create. A heavier soil will create a wider cone, and a more lighter soil will create a more narrow cone. So that's also good to keep in mind if you want to look at your work result and your cultivation bottom. So a key component there is to see soil type does have an implication on the work result down there as well. We also have a number of points with the breaking ability of different kinds. If we look what is the work that the point should do for the plant is maximize the nutrient uptake. So we want to make sure the root can reach all areas of the soil horizon that we are working in. The plants are quite fantastic. I have a slide here with a rye plant, for example, and it's just fascinating. 620 kilometer of root length in just a 50-liter pot. But we need to think about what do we give for our plant. So the bigger our pot that we can offer, the more chance that plant has to take up more nutrients and give us a high yield. So that's our job, to optimize this pot, make it as big as possible. Any compaction is really bad for us because that limits our yield. Some compaction will limit it early, other compaction later in the plant development phase, but all compactions are yield limiting. So that's good to keep in mind. We need to break them. It also, when we have compactions, it also often comes problems with water, that we don't get the water away, we don't drain the water sufficient. So this picture shows a little bit about how oilseed rape roots can react on different water content. So the root will tell you right away how what you have down there. Do we have a compaction? We should break it right away, just to ensure that the water can move upwards with the capillarity, but also downwards, so to get rid of rain water, so it don't drown our roots in that horizon. So therefore, it's important always to go beneath your compaction and to break it up. We do three major things when we work with the compactions. We make sure that the water transport is maintained or get back into shape again. We also let air inside of the slot that we're making. So that starts mineralization. And that, of course, will also help the plant to grow afterwards also. We help the root development quite a bit by offering a channel where it can go without any big problems down there. No compaction, anything. It's quick entry, it can go down and get hold of water quickly. If we look at what we do in the soil with the water, the more we mix and the more we move, the more we also lose of the moisture content in the soil. So if we reduce the amount of soil that we are working, we also will reduce the moisture losses. So that's good to keep in mind, dry years especially. When we go less intensive down in depth, we also save our the root material down there, bacteria. We save our earthworms. On stony soils, we do not want to pick up stones. They should rather stay down there. So there are quite some benefits also, not go all intensive in the whole horizon. When we reconsolidate, especially on heavier soils, especially on a bit drier years, if we can go a bit more shallow, the reconsolidation will be more effective. So it's always challenging. The drier it is, the more cloddy content we have to reconsolidate properly. So that makes it easy if you go stripwise also with breaking points. You should though be very careful in the wet years to go with breaking points. You risk to smear the horizon, and that does more harm than it does good for you. So it's not always good. The best way to work such a soil is during dry conditions. You should also be aware of slugs that can use this strip a little bit as a place to stay where they can get shadow and moisture. So it's important that we get the right type of conditions for it. If we look a little bit at water, water is interesting because the more pressure we can build up, that's a hydrostatic law, the better, or the more pillar we can build up, the more pressure we will have, so the water leaves. You can see this below here. If we start on one side, you see the plow, where we have a flat bottom. It takes quite a while to build up that pressure. Whereas if we go with the traditional cultivator, we get a horizon like this, and the pressure builds up quite a bit faster. So it may take half the time, since much of the horizon is unmoved. But if you go with the breaking point, you make the pillar builds up right away. So that's the reason why your fields can drain many times very, very fast when you use a breaking point instead of a traditional point. So it does have a big impact on the water transport abilities. Here you can see a couple of photos of plowed land. A plow is usually said it can take up 50 millimeters of rain. But after that, it's saturated, and then it starts to look like this. Here it probably would have been better to have a breaking point where the water pillar would have been building up and pressing itself through the compactions below. We have 3 unique Väderstad points that can help you with these tasks, starting with the low disturbance, break mix, and deep loosening. So this is a really nice toolbox for you to manage these things. If we start with the low disturbance, this one splits the soil flow. So it doesn't go on the point, bring it up. No, it just goes past and brings up minimum amount of clods to the surface. So it is not much easy to pull. Should be aware about that. When we press ourselves through the soil, it takes straw force requirement. We also have the break mix point, and that's a unique point, the only one on the market doing 2 things with 1 point. In the bottom we break, and on top we mix. So, and that is makes it very, very interesting because it opens up new horizons, new places we can use it. So very nice thing. If we want to go deep, or also if we want to lift a little bit of the horizon, we can use the deep loosening, and that's also a very nice invention from Väderstad. It lifts the soil a little bit, so this means it cracks up the any cultivation soil from below, and manage to get the water transport going through there. It can go all the way down to 40 centimeters of working depth. So it can replace another subsoil on the farm, depending a little bit on the working depth that the farmer usually go. But so it widens the use of a top-down or an opus, for example, if you can also take care of this a little bit deeper work when needed. It needs roughly 5 to 8 horsepower per deep loosening point. So be aware of that. That adds horsepower need also, of course, since we go deep. And deep, that's where the most horsepower is needed. You can use this on the whole working width, or you can use it on selected spots, like in the wheel tracks, for example. In the wheel tracks, that's where we have a little bit damaging weight, so it may make sense to loosen them a little bit extra to get the same conditions for all the plants, also in the wheel tracks. The deep loosening is put behind the normal point. And that's a real nice feature because you have you lift the soil not all the way down from the beginning, but you lift in 2 steps. And by doing this, you save draw force requirement. The Australians have done trials on this. It shows 10 to 18% reduction draw force requirement by doing this instead of going all the way down right away. So it is substantial savings. It's when we have it mounted on the back, it does not interfere with the release height. And that's also very important. If you have stones or whatever, it will always keep the full release height and not damage the machine or the tine. It has a flat front, and a flat front, when you go that deep in the soil, it's important because that keeps you, leaves you an open horizon on the side of that slot. So it does not smear the sides like a pointed front would do. There are also points where we can cut here on top and we can go down and break below. Quite interesting combination, isn't it? Here we have different possibilities. We can go either with a brake mix combination, a wing shear and a deep loosening, or we can take a mixing point together with a wing shear and a deep loosening. So many combination possibilities by being modular. So that's a nice keyword here. So for this type of shallow work, we can either choose to depends a little bit on the intensity you want to work with. You can mount it with the brake mix, with the brake mix and the deep loosening, and with the mixing point, wing shear and deep loosening. So wide variety of possibilities with intensity you can experiment with here. Here you can see an example where we used the brake mix together with wing shears. It was a really dry year. We made not so deep tillage. We did not do many clods. So we got the perfect structure. Still, that could take up a lot of rain afterwards without completely going to dust. So always see the year and see what type of possibility do I have this year. We also have the braking only points. So the modularity offers us many possibilities there as well. So the first is the low disturbance. So you can see to one side, we have in the middle is the brake mix. So these ones, they go down to 30 centimeters. To the right, you also have a mixing point together with a brake mix. No, together with a deep loosening, I'm sorry. And those are all possible to go down to that depth. If you want to mount the deep loosening on all tines though, you are limited to 25 centimeter working depth due to the machine and how, so that should manage to with the release pressure. You can use the brake mix. That's an excellent point. For example, if you want to prepare for oilseed rape, here you keep quite a lot of the moisture in the soil, but you still manage to get a track down for the root. So the plant always has the possibility to enter as deep as it needs to go for moisture. So this, on 2018, which was a dry year, some of the farmers saved their oilseed rape by using the brake mix point. So it can be very, very crucial which point you choose. If we want to go really deep, we mount the deep loosening on them. That's only mounted on the back row though. So be aware of that, the back row of opus and top down. You can combine that with a low disturbance. You can combine it with a brake mix or a normal mixing point. So you have the full possibility there as well. And that's what makes it interesting. Here you can see it combined with a low disturbance, the way we only break through the horizon. Here it is with a deep loosening. You can see this, how nice it is just behind the point itself, already going into prepared soil more or less. Here you can see horizon that we create with a mixing point combine. So very wide possibility of adaptation here due to this modularity. You can also see, sometimes you can ask, yeah, when should I use a break mix and when a deep loosening? Anyway, they look a little bit similar, don't they? But no, there are quite some big differences here. You will have a little bit better mixing ability if you use a deep loosening, because there you have nothing that splits soil flow in front of the mixing part of the point. So it will bring more soil upwards. It will though take quite a bit of more draw force requirement for you. And it does a different job in the soil. A break mix point will never lift the soil on the bottom of the trench. That will happen though with a deep loosening, and that costs power. So good to keep those in mind as well. You will see some customers asking, why do I even need the first one? But they do offer quite different work for you. When we have breaking points, we also have the ability to work a little bit with strip tillage, so to say. The residue intensive strip tillage, that is not the one that we're used to with the row crops that's really wide, where we save a lot of the residues between. No, residue intensive strip tillage is a intensive shallow cultivation where we incorporate the residues and also a tighter row distance between those strips. So just for you to understand the differentiation there between the two. You want to work stripwise for a number of reasons. It often depends on the customer, what they prefer. If there are problems, for example, with weeds, that starts to cost so much that there has to be a change in the work-wise. We have erosion problems. We want to reduce tillage overall. So it all depends a little bit on why you want to go strip-wise, but there are a number of benefits to it. We can offer quite a bit of differentiation in the working depths. Everything from going ultra shallow to go shallow, medium or deep. So this gives you many possibilities to offer the customer something interesting. So use this ability that our machine can offer to you. So almost all of our machines are very flexible, so you can see which one to use for what, and together with which tools. So a very interesting ability. If you look at the points, you have to see also how much do you work. So a low disturbance, for example, it works not so much, but it should be combined then together with a disc working very intensive on the top soil. A break mix, it works a bit more on top, a little bit less below. So be aware of what you do with the soil with a different point. We have the possibility to raise some tines on the primarily on the top down, but also on the opposite is possible. And this is mostly recommended for breaking points. If you do this with mixing points, you risk that you will have a row-wise distribution of the residues. So that can be a problem doing that. We have the possibility, if you have a big grassweed problem, there is a lot of talk about rotational plowing. And then we can start to see, okay, what can we do there? And actually we have quite a bit of possibilities. We have the shortest possible plow establishment chain with the Residue Twin, for example, and the Rapide. After when the stubble has been, when the seed has been harvested, we can go with stubble cultivation, ultra shallow. This is very good to get a germination reflex going for the seeds in the ground of the grassweed seeds. So we can get them up there. We can, after that, in order to create a good root space, we can go with a low disturbance, for example, so that we cut through those old plowed furrows, and therefore we increase the mineralization and ensures that the residues down there are completely decomposed and not stopping our current crop. After that, we can spray. We can establish with, for example, a repeat again, lifting front tools, only using the disc for the direct drilling, disturbing minimal of the weed seeds in the ground. We have the possibility to establish a oilseed rape crop or a cover crop with the top down or the opus combined with the biodrill. And that's a nice feature because we can manage to get the roots down there perfect. We have no wheel tracks, nothing disturbing on the topsoil at all. So this is a great way to establish a small seed crop or a cover crop, and it can be combined also with fertilization. So that gives you a really nice strip tillage. Usually you get a good moisture as well in the soil. That makes it interesting. When you have made strips of any kind or whatever, try to get roots in there, just like with a cover crop or, for example, or a good crop, so that you stabilize the expensive cultivation that you've just been making. That's the important part. Here you can see the combination with fertilization on the photo. Very nice, I think. With the fertilizer, we can also vary a little bit how we place the fertilizer by changing the point. Because one point, mixing quite a lot, it will overflow some of the fertilizer by the previous tines, for example. So there are some differences there how the fertilizer will be placed. So if we start to look what points we should choose, it depends very much on your crop, like we said before also. To guide you a little bit here, we've been trying to make a couple of slides now where you can look up a little bit according to the crop and everything, what to do. The first one here is quite an advanced table. It shows you on the top row, you can see which is your crop that you're going into. And the second row is a crop that you will establish afterwards. And below there you can follow which type of disc work, if you want to do stubble preparation on that one, how deep that should be and what the task of it is. Going further down, you see the tine work, depth, and also the task. Sometimes it's one pass, sometimes it's two passes. It depends on your soil and how it's clodding and so on. So, but this should act as a guide to so that you should make a better choice. On the following slides here, I will not go into detail, but you will see also, according to crop, a little bit more recommendations here. So we start with oilseed rape, for example. After that, grain crops. You can see combined maize, sunflower. So what we can see now, adding up a little bit, there is no universal point. And that's a bit contrary to what most of our customers are using now, because they often buy the cultivator with one point and that's what they keep on all the time. No, it's all about the toolbox. So you need to have as good toolbox as possible to manage to take care of the different weather conditions and also soil conditions so you're always perfect. So to a cultivator, I personally think there should be 2 or 3 set of different points in order to manage to take all the conditions available. The working depth is always something you discuss a lot with the customers about. There are some who can never get enough. If you can work 30, they want to work 40. If you can work 40, they want to work 50. So, but if we look at the factory point of view, how deep do I actually need to work? Is deep always better? You can see the photos here. There are some very happy gentlemen, but the problem is they may not be as happy when they pay their diesel bill. So It's not always agronomically defendable either to go too deep. You should be economic to make the best for your plants and the soil biology, but not too much. Many times you should vary a little bit year to year your cultivation depth. That prevents that you have a pan that counts if you go every year exactly the same working depth. So important to think about that a little bit. Otherwise, there is no clear rule. You should always go as shallow as possible and as deep as necessary. That's the thinking. Bring a spade, bring a penetrometer, and you will feel right away where is the compaction pan, for example, that I need to break. It costs to go deeper as well. 1 centimeter means 10 cubic meter on 1 hectare. That's quite a bit of soil that we're moving. So you can see we have to raise it quite a bit as well in the height also. This much soil means about per hectare 6 truckloads of soil with 26 tons of each. So a lot of soil that we may not have to move. So therefore, as shallow as possible. It costs you roughly 5% of your draw force requirement every centimeter that you go into the soil. If you have no problems with compactions, you may not always need to go that very deep. You can see on this slide here, it all of course depends on the year and everything. Like you see after the wheat and so on, how much straw do I have? But after the oilseed rape, for example, many people go much too deep. The oilseed rape leaves us a superstructure down in the soil. It leaves us a lot of earthworms. Don't go down and destroy that. You're not going to make it better by cultivating too deep. So you're burning diesel without getting any payback for it. If you have a hilly condition, add another 15% of your draw force requirement. That's quite a lot too. We need to go deeper than our tracks, for example. That's really important. After harvest, if we had a wet year, you can have quite a bit of combine tracks. You need to go under them so you get away the compactions there. It's, like I said before, straw dependent. There is an old rule of thumb that says roughly 2 centimeter per ton of straw. So it all depends on which variety you're choosing, for example, how much straw does it produce. But you should also be aware it's not only the depth, it's also point width, because that means you can increase your volume that you're working. And you can also work with the shins width, so that you take more soil with you upwards. So keep that in mind. It's not only depth, it's intensity and volume. When we're looking at depth, it's also interesting to see how deep do we work the residues in. You cannot expect to find very many residues below 75% of your working depth. That's roughly where it ends, what a point can actually, or a tine can actually manage to mix in. Good to keep in mind. There is also a rule of thumb that says the amount of centimeters, or the distance between the iron is also distance or the depth that you should go to get a well mixed surface horizon. If you look at that and use that a little bit and see, okay, to translate that to working depths, you can see that basically the more shallow work, the wider our point would be, the deeper we go, the narrower the point should be. If we take that and translate a little bit, we can make an intensity chart and see what does the different points do to us. We have made the Väderstad point matrix for you, and that should act as a guide, a help for decisions. It takes away this problem that we saw before, that the farmer doesn't know what to choose exactly. The Väderstad point matrix gives you an excellent guide for choice. Here you can see exactly what each point should do for you. You can see the maximum working depth. So it depends, of course, on the width between the points, but it will always remain the same towards each other. So yes, they may the depth may not be exactly like your current cultivator, but in relation to the rest of them, it will be. Here you can also see the work they want to do. You can see how much soil we are mixing. You can see if we're just breaking and so on. So it offers you really a visual way to speak to anybody about cultivated points, which is great, I think. And now we're coming to the shins. The shin of a is just above the point, and it takes care of the soil that the point has broken loose. So it's a very important part, but also underestimated. Not many people have been thinking about, okay, what type of shin should I choose actually? There's always been discussion about the point, but it's been often forgotten what's happening up there. It influences the straw mixing ability, your leveling. So it influences also what your crumbling, how that's going to be, and where your soil will go to. So therefore, the shin is something very important. Pay attention to it. It should be as important as your choice of point. When you should describe to farmers, they say, what is a shin? Why should I care? Yeah, but if you ask him, yeah, but you care about the body of your plow, what that looks like. And it's about the same thing. It has an immense importance to the work result you get. Väderstad has chosen to go for something called the mixing shin, and that means we are moving our material forward all the way. We also offer something we call the twisted shin. That was what we started with until we found out the benefits of the mix-in. First of all, it gives us a superior mixing. And superior mixing, that is so important. That is what the cultivator is all about, is to mix in residues. So this is something, keep that in mind. And what happens when we put the material always in front of us? We touch it several times. So therefore we will bury it better than we would otherwise. If we throw the material a bit sideways, upwards, when we're driving forward, we basically throw it up quite a bit, we let it go down again. The lighter particles will come down a bit slower than the heavy ones, and that will cause the effect that we will have more residues in the surface or close to the surface than you will with a mix-in. So very important difference there. So you can see here, you can test yourself, take some soil, take some straw, drop it, and you will see the difference. Does this mean anything economically? Oh, certainly does, because if you can mix better, or you can mix the same at a couple of centimeters less, this means that you can reduce this working depth with a couple of centimeters, and that is pure money. On 250 hectares, for example, I made the example here. It gives you on 10 years 4,000 euro. If you go 500 hectares, it's double that. If you go 1,000, it's 4 times that. This start to get quite some money if you can reduce the working depth a little. Or otherwise, you simply end up with a better work result, which is also quite nice. When you work with a straw lot, you break it more and more all the time. So the straw will break down better as well. The more entrance we give for the microbes, the better it is. We get the residues better distributed depth-wise. So we will have less on the top, we will have more on the bottom, and that's a really nice thing. You can see here the comparison between the mix-in and the traditional twisted shin, and a plow, for example, where the residues are distributed. And an aim is to get them down a little bit more. And why is that? Because the humus creation, that's where we have the coal created in the soil. And the humus is best created a little bit further down. You can see the 3 pillars here. Those are the 3 different types of soil where we can see where the humus is created. On the heavier soils, you can see it's a little bit more to the top. On the middle pillar, that's the medium soil. It's a little bit deeper, and on the lighter soil, you can see it's even further down. And what we aim for is a zone 2. That is our target in order to manage to get the long-term benefits of the humus creation in the soil. So mixing ability matters. You can see this and test this yourself by using one of the straw grids that we have. Either you make one your own, it's quite easy to make, or you use ours. What they do is to focus your view a little bit more to see where are the residues located, which depth you can, and that's also good on field days. You get the eyes of the people to the spot where you want to have them. For the surface, you can use our surface straw guide, also available. So that way you can see how much do I have in the surface. Is this what I aim for? Or is this a problem? Do I need to react on that? So always important to check your work result. Is it what I aim for? You also, with the mixing shin, get a superior lengthwise distribution. By always bringing all the residues with us in the driving direction, we distribute them well. And why is that important? It's because the combine many times does not leave the perfect work result as we would wish it does. You can test this by yourself by getting 1 meter of your combine result along the working width together and see what happens there exactly, how much straw we have throughout the working width. And it's seldom going to be very perfect there, unfortunately. Also, the newest combines doesn't matter if they are perfect from beginning. If you have a change of moisture, if you have a change in the wind, it's very difficult to compensate that. What does this cause us? We have a big problem then that if we get uneven distributed straw in the horizon, some places you will have more need of nitrogen and more need of oxygen, where that straw that you incorporated will need to be broken down. If there are less straw here than here, you will have an uneven emergence afterwards. And we do not get the same conditions for all plants. And that is the whole thing, what we all aim for, same conditions on all plants. So the mix in shin helps you to improve that. Combine with also use a straw harrow when you do the stubble cultivation. This is a key component. If we look also at how should we drive, we should always drive a little bit angled, to just like we do with the stubble cultivation, to get this effect the best. So that's important part. And if we compare what happens without anything after the combine, we have more straw. If we go conventional, there will be some straw distribution in the lengthwise, but not as good as with the mixing. The mixing will leave you an excellent job afterwards, very even. You can test this yourself as well. We tend to use wood chips. Wood chips are great because they will travel with you a little bit, but maybe not as long as straw. But nevertheless, you can see with the mixing shin, you can find them sometimes 30 meters away from the point of initiation. So that is quite a cool way to follow up. Am I doing a good distribution lengthwise? We also, by bringing soil with us, get a good leveling. That's the same thing as you know with the crossboard or with a tine on a harrow, for example, seedbed preparation. That brings soil with you in the driving direction. Same thing with the mixing. So basically, here you can also save a little bit of working depth by going less deep. After tracks, for example, you can still manage to get the field level. So also money right here to be saved by doing a better job simply. By not throwing any material sideways, or hardly any anyway, in the cultivator, we also get a more level work result. Because this is important, the less we throw in different direction, the better it is. It's always difficult to transport material in different directions in the cultivator. What we bring to one side in the front has a completely different condition in the back, so it's hard to do the same thing exactly. You can test how level your work result will be as well. That's important to see, am I happy with the work result of the cultivator? I also have a very nice feature on the heavy soil, and that's clod breaking. The clods are created a bit different depending on where they are on the shin. So some material goes straight up, and that's actually where we will have the biggest clods. Some material leaves along the shin. That's where we have the smallest clods of all. Some gets piled up around the shin. We will have some mixed material in there. So there will be some a little bit bigger and a lot of fine tilth as well. With the mix in shin, we have two things working for us to break the clods. First of all, it's the gravity, because the gravity, when the accelerated soil comes to a certain point, the gravity takes over and breaks up that soil flow. So that reduces a lot of clods. But we should be aware also, we have loaded a lot of energy into that soil flow. When that hits the ground, you will have a lot of those clods also breaking up from this impact as well. So actually two ways of breaking the clods with the mix in. So we do produce a finer tilth after the mix in shin compared to conventional shin. That's a big benefit for you there. The finer tilth means that you will have a better seed bed, you will have a better germination of the plants, so it's always better to reduce and avoid the clods. If you bury clods, it's very hard to do anything about them. They're actually very damaging to your coming crop. They are local compactions, and those local compactions you can see on this picture here, here is a root trying to penetrate into clod, but it can't. It will not get to those nutrients in there. This means your plants will, the plant on top will not be this high, it will be that high, and will not yield as much. If we make big clods, it's hard to reconsolidate as well. So we want to avoid that anyway. You can test the amount of clods you do by sieving the soil. We have excellent type of sheets where you can, PVC sheets, you can place out there, pour out your different fractions, and you can discuss, is this what I wanted to achieve? Yes or no? The shin has different shapes and sizes as well, and that also makes it this modularity when it comes in and makes it really beautiful as well. Generally, we have to look what do we use which years. A wet year, there's one type of shin you want to use. 80 is working perfect there, and depending on the point and everything, 50 or 80 point, not going in with too wide points. On a dry year, you want to go usually with a wider shin, but there's also depends on how some dry years are going to have very loose material, then a wide shin can be a problem as well. You need to have pressure from below pressing up material all the time to get the mixing going well. You can use a wider shin than you have the point, and that's a very cheap way to manage to get more mixing for this almost the same money. So that I think makes it interesting. You are actually not only the mixing, you increase all these capabilities we've been speaking about before. Mixing, lengthwise distribution. you increase the leveling and also the clod breaking. So if possible, test to increase the width of the shin as well. That's a really nice thing. You can look at the different shapes of the shin. With the modularity we have now, we can either have a straight body together with point and shin, or we can go with a widening straight in the bottom and widening on top, or we can go with the arrow shaped almost with widening down there and widening up here as well. So we have a lot of possibilities now with the amount of shins we can offer the customer. The good thing also with mixing, we don't get any soil on the frame. We don't bring that much soil from field to field. So this is something to reduce problematic with grass seeds and everything, or weed seeds. Always good to be doing less of that. We spoke about before when you saw that table, you remember, with the depth recommendations. There you had just one depth with the tines. Many times in the heavier soils, this is not possible. You might have to go work stepwise. This is to avoid clod creation, because if we go too fast into a lot of depth with a tine on a heavy soil, we will create clods. So therefore, it's important to take that maybe 2 passes on the way down. So also a reason why the top down has discs in the front, for example, we work stepwise in the same machine already. Here you can see a comparison between going different depths. That's with the Swift. And you can see right away the clod size increases quite a bit there when we go deeper. But you should also be aware you still need to have enough depth difference so that you have a shoving upwards, that there is a material flow. Otherwise, the soil flow will split in front of the shin and will not go with you upwards. So it's weighing off how big should my steps be. Not too big, not too small. How fast should I work then? Working with a cultivator is important that we keep roughly between 10 and 12 kilometers per hour. 10 and 12 kilometers gives us the perfect speed where we have a good material mixture. You can actually see this when you drive yourself, because it starts to boil in the machine. You see this movement of soil, and that's when you're up in a good speed. If you go too slow, you will have a furrow making and you will not get the material to work for you. So your mixing result will be miserable, and it will just be partly a waste of money what you're doing there. You can work faster. That's not going to inhibit your work result, but it will take a lot more diesel consumption and you will have a higher wear. So the most economic speed to go is between 10 and 12 kilometers per hour. So thank you very much for having patience and listening to the tines and point concept from Väderstad. I really hope this will guide you, that this will help you to sell your cultivator, to understand your cultivator, and to love soil, because this is what we work with, and when you start to understand it, the more you know, the better it gets. So good luck, and thank you once again for your patience.